Raise your hand if you've ever been a classroom teacher. Woohoo! And keep those hands up if you've ever borrowed a lesson from another teacher, whether online or in person. And keep those hands up if those lessons felt successful. Right? That is not a coincidence. Is it because the internet and our other teachers are full of the best lessons? No, I don't think so. I don't actually think the quality of the lessons you get from other teachers is what makes them so great. I think that the lessons we get from other teachers are great because they come from other teachers. And when you get a lesson from another teacher, whether online or in person, it comes with a story. You are learning why they taught that lesson, what was happening in their classroom, what didn't work, and what did work. So why does that matter? Why does getting a lesson with a story make the lesson so good? I want to introduce you to Dr. Nicole Kirsting from Arizona State University. She has a website where you can go and watch videos of classrooms and then analyze them. And so you submit to her your analysis, and as a researcher, she connects the analysis and she looks at how do we talk about teaching. And she compares how we talk about teaching to classroom improvement. And what she found is that the only way of talking about teaching that correlated directly with students learning more was making suggestions to improve the mathematical content of the lesson. So when you get a lesson from a blog, you're already thinking about how can I improve the mathematical content of the lesson? You know what the problems were with the lesson, you know what students did and didn't understand, you know why the lesson was taught. And so you're thinking, how could I improve this lesson? How could I make the mathematics connect to my students? What's different in my situation? What do I need to tweak? And that thinking is the kind of thinking that correlates directly with improved student outcomes. Compare that, if you will, to a teacher's edition. They don't tend to invite that kind of thinking from us. They tend to tell us, this is the lesson you will teach, this is how you will teach it, and your job is to implement that. And that's what most of the support in the teacher's edition is for. So should we all go get all of our lessons from blogs? Because those are the lessons that come with stories and make us think like improvers, think like the people who have better classroom outcomes. Well, here's what happens when I try and go get all of my lessons from blogs. Say my students are struggling to add integers, and I go find a great blog post about somebody who used chips, and they taught me how the red chips and the black chips cancel out and make 0, and so when you add a positive and a negative, you get 0, and my students understand addition of integers better than they ever have before. But when I go to teach them subtraction of integers, and we're trying to do 2 minus 3, I have a hard time explaining the 0 pairs, and so my students think that's a procedure, and they don't understand why 2 minus 3 leaves -1. And then we try and teach multiplication, and I can't find any good chip resources for multiplication, so I teach them multiplication on the number line, but my students didn't practice adding and subtracting on the number line, so they don't understand integers on the number line, and so then they're really confused by the time we get to multiplication. And so even though all of my lessons were great, my students didn't learn about integers. So the reason not to get all of our lessons from blogs is coherence. Making a coherent story about the mathematics is really hard when you're pulling from everybody on the internet. And coherence is expensive. It's not something that one teacher can create in a year from everything on the internet. It's not something that one PLC can create, because it takes vertical alignment and horizontal alignment and standards alignment and pedagogical alignment, consistency. All those things are time and money intensive. And that's why teachers' editions end up being written like Bibles. We think that in order to sell curriculum that we've invested so much money in, we must make it sound like our curriculum is the best, it is the way to teach, and we can't tell you how we wrote it. So we end up with these locked-down curriculum that don't explain any of the thinking and richness that went into writing it. If we want teachers to teach well, we have to free the textbooks. And I don't mean open education resources. I mean that authors should be talking about the struggle that went into deciding how to represent integers in the integer chapter. They should be blogging publicly about it and engaging with the teachers who are going to teach. There should be commenting on how authors are thinking. And then the teachers who are implementing should be writing about the choices they make as implementers and how that affects how the curriculum is actually enacted. And then the authors should be coming back and commenting and saying, wow, I never thought about that, or that's an interesting way to do it. And then everybody is in that mindset of making suggestions for improvement. Everything we read about the curriculum puts us in the mode of thinking that improves classroom instruction. So when we talk about what should curriculum look like in the 21st century, should it be open education resources? I would push back and say, don't put your money on open source. Don't put your money on crowdsource. Put your money on open stories and crowd engagement.